Hello, my dear friends. Today I want to take you on a journey through one of the most exciting and turbulent periods in history, the reign of the Umayyads and Abbasids, the heroism of Charles Martel, and the founding of the Holy Roman Empire. Are you ready? Close your eyes and let your imagination run wild. I will take you back to a time when swords clashed, armies marched, and glorious empires were built. This is not just a story of historical events, but an epic full of stories of courage, betrayal, victory, and defeat. As you follow in the footsteps of these heroes and kings, you will witness one of humanity's greatest adventures. These stories are not just events of the past, but lessons that tell us who we are and where we came from. By learning from the past, we can look to the future with more hope. So let's start this exciting journey without delay. Are you ready? Let's go. Dear friends, let's jump into our time machine and transport ourselves to the middle of the 7th century, a period known as the Golden Age of Islam. At this time, the rule of the first 4 caliphs, established after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, is coming to an end. The Islamic world is on the brink of a political and religious crisis. At this very moment, an ambitious and brilliant man named Umayyad bin Abu Sufyan appears on the scene. Umayyad is governor of Syria and is highly respected among the Arab tribes of the region. After the assassination of Caliph Uthman, Muawiyah declares himself caliph and establishes the Umayyad state. This historical event represents a major turning point in the Islamic world. The Umayyads took control of the Arabian Peninsula and transformed Islam into a world power. But this rise was not easy. As soon as Muawiyah declared his caliphate, he was dragged into a civil war started by Prophet Ali and his supporters. This civil war set the stage for important events in Islamic history, such as the Battle of Jamal and the Battle of Siffin. By winning these battles, Muawiyah consolidated his caliphate and strengthened the foundation of the Umayyad state. During Muawiyyah's caliphate, Islamic lands experienced a great expansion. The Umayyads established a vast empire stretching from North Africa to Central Asia. Thanks to these conquests, Islamic culture and civilization spread throughout the world. Dear friends, I would now like to take you to one of the most tragic and heartbreaking events in Islamic history, the Karbala incident, which took place in 680 in the Iraqi city of Karbala and resulted in the martyrdom of Prophet Muhammad's grandson Hussein and 72 of his companions. Hussein was a leader who opposed the tyrannical rule of the Caliph Yazid. In order to legitimize the caliphate, Yazid was pressuring members of the Prophet Muhammad's family to pledge allegiance to Hussein. But Hussein openly declared that he would never submit to Yazid's cruel and immoral rule. This enraged Yazid, and he refused to allow Hussein to go to Karbala. Hussein and his companions were on their way to a group of Muslims from Kufa who had promised to support him. However, in the face of Yazid's threats, the people of Kufa betrayed Hussein and left him alone. In Karbala, Hussein and his companions confronted Yazid's army. Despite being greatly outnumbered, Prophet Hussein and his companions fought to the end and were heroically martyred. The Karbala incident is significant not only for the death of Prophet Hussein and his companions, but also as a turning point in Islamic history. This event clearly revealed the persecution of the family and followers of Prophet Muhammad and the cruel rule of Yazid. The event of Karbala is still remembered today, and the courage and faith of Prophet Hussein and his companions remains an inspiration for all Muslims. Dear friends, I would like to take you to Europe, to the land of Spain, where the Umayyads built a brilliant empire. Our story begins in 717, when the Umayyad army, led by a brave commander named Tariq bin Ziyad, landed on the Iberian Peninsula. Tariq bin Ziyad set out from North Africa with an army of 7,000 men and set foot in Spain by crossing the Strait of Gibraltar. This historic event is known as the Conquest of Gibraltar and is a turning point in Spanish history. Tariq's army had to capture a rocky hill north of the strait. This hill was the key to the entrance to the mainland of the peninsula. Tariq devised a plan to capture the hill and sent his soldiers to climb up through the rocks. After a difficult climb, the Umayyad soldiers managed to conquer the hill, and Tariq named it Jabal Tariq, Tariq's mountain, in honor of this victory. The conquest of Gibraltar was the key for the Umayyads to enter Spain. After capturing the fortress on the hill, Tariq's army quickly advanced and began to conquer Andalusia. Following Tariq bin Ziyad, a commander named Musa bin Nusayr was sent to Spain, and the conquest was accelerated. Musa bin Nusayr landed on the peninsula with an army of 18,000 men and took command of the army under Tariq's command. Musa bin Nusayr continued the conquest started by Tariq with great speed. He captured Toledo, the capital of the Visigoth kingdom, and brought Andalusia completely under the control of the Umayyads. Musa bin Nusayr captured many important cities and fortresses during his conquests. These cities included Cordoba, Granada, Seville, and Malaga. The establishment of the Umayyad state of Andalusia was not only a political event, but also the beginning of a cultural and religious change. The Umayyads brought the Islamic religion and Arab culture to Spain. During this period, many cities and mosques were built, and great progress was made in science and art. The Andalusian Umayyad Empire became one of the most important civilizations in Europe. The city of Cordoba became famous as the largest and most developed city in Europe. The Umayyads made significant contributions to Europe in many fields such as mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and medicine. The Umayyad palace in Cordoba, Medina-e-Zara, captivated Europe with its splendor and beauty. This palace hosted many scientists and artists and became one of the most important intellectual centers in Europe. The golden age of the Andalusian Umayyad state began in the 10th century and lasted until the 11th century. During this period, the Umayyad state of Andalusia reached its political, economic, cultural, and artistic peak. My dear friends, I would now like to take you to one of the greatest revolts of the Umayyad state, the Berber Revolt, which broke out in North Africa in 743 and shook the very foundation of the Umayyad state. The Berber Revolt had more than one cause. The Berbers had long been dissatisfied with Umayyad rule. The Umayyads regarded the Berbers as second-class citizens and taxed them heavily. The Berbers also resented the Umayyad imposition of Arab culture on the Berbers. In 743, a charismatic Berber leader named Maysara al-Makkari emerged. Maysara convinced the Berbers to rise up against the Umayyads and became the leader of the revolt. The Berber Revolt quickly spread across North Africa. The Berbers defeated the Umayyad armies and captured many cities. The rebels took control of important cities such as Tangier, Kairouan, and Tunis. The Umayyad Caliph Hisham ibn Abdul-Malik sent a large army against the Berbers. But the Umayyad armies struggled against the resistance of the Berbers. Hisham offered Maysara a bribe, but Maysara refused. The Berber Revolt was a great blow for the Umayyad state. The Umayyads failed to defeat the Berbers and lost many territories in North Africa. This rebellion led to the weakening of the Umayyad state and the rise of the Abbasids. Maysara al-Makkari was captured and executed by the Umayyads in 744. But the Berbers did not surrender, and the rebellion continued until 745. In 745, the Umayyads were forced to reach an agreement with the Berbers. According to this agreement, the Berbers were to be granted more rights and freedoms. The Berber Rebellion is an important turning point in the history of the Umayyad state. It weakened the Umayyad control over the Berbers and contributed to the rise of the Abbasids. Also, thanks to this revolt, the Berbers managed to preserve their identity and culture. Dear friends, I would now like to take you to an important event that marked the end of the Umayyad state and the beginning of a new era in Islamic history, the defeat of the Umayyads by the Abbasids and the establishment of a new caliphate in Baghdad. This event took place in 750 at the Battle of the Great Zab and radically changed the political and religious map of the Islamic world. The weakening of the Umayyad state paved the way for the rise of the Abbasids. The Abbasids were descendants of Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, the uncle of Prophet Muhammad. In contrast to the Umayyad Arab nationalism and indulgence in luxury, the Abbasids presented themselves as the legitimate heirs of the caliphs descended from the Prophet Muhammad. The Abbasids realized that there was great popular discontent with the Umayyads. The Umayyads' oppressive rule, high taxes and inequalities had angered many and led them to sympathize with the Abbasids. In 750, the Great Battle of Zab took place between the Abbasids and the Umayyads. This battle took place on the banks of the Great Zab River in northern Iraq. The Umayyad army was vastly outnumbered by the Abbasid army, but the Abbasids were better organized and had more motivated fighters. The outcome of the battle was a victory for the Abbasids. The Umayyad Caliph Marwan I died in the battle and the Umayyad state came to an end. The Abbasids chose the city of Baghdad as their new capital and established a new caliphate in the Islamic world. The Abbasid Caliphate is considered a golden age in Islamic history. During this period, great progress was made in the fields of science, art, philosophy, and literature. The city of Baghdad became one of the most important centers of science and culture in the world. The Abbasids showed tolerance to people of different religions and ethnicities and made a great contribution to the development of Islamic civilization. The Abbasid Caliphate ended with the destruction of Baghdad by the Mongols in the 13th century. The defeat of the Umayyads by the Abbasids was an important turning point in the Islamic world. It put an end to the Umayyad rule based on Arab nationalism and reinforced the legitimacy of the caliphs who were descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. The Abbasid Caliphate contributed greatly to the development of Islamic civilization and has an important place in world history. Dear friends, now I would like to take you to one of the most brilliant periods of the Abbasid state, the Caliphate of Harun Rashid, and the golden age that this period brought. Our story begins in 786, when Harun Rashid ascended to the throne. Harun Rashid was born in 766 and became the Abbasid Caliph in 786 after the death of his older brother Hadi. Harun Rashid was 20 years old when he ascended the throne and was known as a very intelligent, charismatic, and just leader. Harun Rashid's ascension to the throne was a new ray of hope for the Abbasid state. After the victory against the Umayyads, the Abbasid state had started to weaken. There were rebellions and throne fights within the state. Harun Rashid succeeded in ending this chaos and restoring the Abbasid state to its former glory. Harun Rashid ruled as caliph for 23 years, and this period is considered as the golden age of the Abbasid state. During Harun Rashid's rule, great progress was made in the fields of science, art, literature, and trade. The city of Baghdad became one of the most important cultural and commercial centers of the world. Harun Rashid was known as a just and merciful leader. He treated everyone equally and showed tolerance to people of different religions and ethnic origins. During the reign of Harun Rashid, prosperity and peace prevailed in the Abbasid state. Important developments in the period of Harun Rashid. Progress in science and art. Harun Rashid attached great importance to the development of science and art. During this period, many important scientists and artists were patronized at the Abbasid court. Important developments were made in fields such as medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. A library and research center called Baitul Hikmi was established in the palace of Harun Rashid. In this library, books from all over the world were collected and translated. Golden Age of literature. The reign of Harun Rashid is also considered the golden age of Arabic literature. During this period, many important poets and writers were patronized by the Abbasid court. Important works such as the 1001 Nights were written during this period. Development of trade. Harun Rashid also attached great importance to the development of trade. During this period, the city of Baghdad became an important trade center. Important trade routes such as the Silk Road passed through the Abbasid state. Harun Rashid died in 809. With his death, the golden age of the Abbasid state came to an end. The caliphs who came after Harun Rashid could not be as strong and just leaders as he was. The Abbasid state gradually began to weaken and was destroyed by the Mongols in the 13th century. Harun Rashid has an important place in Islamic history. His just and merciful rule inspired many people. The developments recorded during the reign of Harun Rashid contributed greatly to the development of Islamic civilization. Dear friends, I would like to take you now to an important revolt that shook the Abbasid state in the 9th century, the capture of Basra by the Sarmatians. This event took place in 870 and was an indication that the Abbasid state was beginning to weaken. The Sarmatians are a group belonging to a heterodox sect of Islam that emerged in the Islamic world in the 9th century. This sect opposed the Abbasids and advocated the idea of imamate. The Sarmatians were known as advocates of equality and justice and believed that wealth should be distributed fairly. In 870, the Sarmatians captured the city of Basra. Basra was one of the most important cities of the Abbasid state, and this capture was a major blow to the Abbasids. The Sarmatians killed many people in Basra and looted the city. The Sarmatians held Basra for several years. In 874, the Abbasid army managed to retake Basra, but this event was an indication that the Abbasid state was beginning to weaken. The capture of Basra by the Sarmatians had many important consequences for the Abbasid Empire. This event was an indication that the Abbasid state began to weaken. The Sarmatians posed an important challenge to the authority of the Abbasid state. The capture of Basra by the Sarmatians also caused great damage to the economy of the Abbasid state. Basra was an important trade center for the Abbasid state, and this capture greatly reduced Abbasid trade revenues. The capture of Basra by the Sarmatians led to a political and religious chaos in the Islamic world. It weakened the Abbasid state's leadership position in the Islamic world and contributed to the rise of other powers. My dear friends, I would now like to take you back to the 10th century and the establishment of a state that occupied an important place in Islamic history, the Fatimid state, founded in Egypt in 907. This event radically changed the political and religious map of the Islamic world and created a new balance of power in the Middle East. The Fatimids are a group belonging to a Shiite sect of Islam that claims descent from Fatima, daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, and her husband Ali. Originating in the 9th century in North Africa, the Fatimids rejected the legitimacy of the Abbasid caliphs and saw themselves as the rightful leaders of Islam. In 907, the Fatimid leader Ubaydallah al-Mahdi conquered Egypt with an army from North Africa. The capture of Egypt, controlled by the Abbasid caliphs, was a great victory for the Fatimids. Ubaydallah al-Mahdi chose Cairo as his new capital and established the Fatimid state. The Fatimid state ruled Egypt and other parts of North Africa for 260 years. During this period, the Fatimid state experienced its golden age in political, economic, and cultural terms. The Fatimids turned Egypt into an important trade and cultural center. The city of Cairo became one of the most important cities in the world, and the Fatimid palaces were filled with dazzling examples of art and architecture. My dear friends, I would now like to take you to an event that shook the Abbasid state in the 10th century and marked an important turning point in Islamic history: the capture of Baghdad by the Buzis in 946. This event weakened the political power of the Abbasid caliphs and led to a new balance of power in the Islamic world. Buzular was a Turkic group that emerged in Iran in the 10th century and rebelled against the Abbasid state. The Buzulars are known by the name of their leader Buzular, and they realized that there was great discontent among the people against the oppressive rule of the Abbasid caliphs. In 946, an army led by Buzular captured Baghdad. This was a major blow for the Abbasid state. The Buzular held Baghdad for several years, during which time the Abbasid caliphs remained under the control of Buzular. The capture of Baghdad by the Buzular had many important consequences for the Abbasid state. It weakened the political power of the Abbasid caliphs and led to a new balance of power in the Islamic world. The Buzis posed an important challenge to the authority of the Abbasid caliphs and signaled the beginning of the weakening of the Abbasid state. The capture of Baghdad by the Buzis also caused great damage to the economy of the Abbasid state. Baghdad was an important trade center for the Abbasid state, and the capture greatly reduced Abbasid trade revenues. The capture of Baghdad by the Buzis led to political and religious chaos in the Islamic world. This event weakened the Abbasid state's leadership position in the Islamic world and contributed to the rise of other powers. Dear friends, I would like to take you now to an important event that radically changed the political map of the Islamic world in the 11th century: the Seljuk Turks' capture of Baghdad in 1055. This event marked the end of the Abbasid state and led to the Seljuks establishing a new hegemony in the Middle East. The Seljuk Turks were a nomadic Turkic community that migrated from Central Asia in the 10th century and converted to Islam. It was founded in the 10th century by Seljuk Bey, a descendant of Oghuz Khan. The Seljuks were known for their brave warriors, disciplined armies, and strong leaders. They soon conquered a large part of Central Asia and began to move westward. In the early 11th century, the Seljuks defeated the Ghaznavid Empire, entered Iran, and took control of other Turkic states in the region. In 1042, at the Battle of Dendakan, the great Seljuk Sultan Tughril Beg defeated the Carolingian Empire and consolidated Turkish rule in Central Asia. Tughril Beg was a strong leader, but he was also a just and merciful ruler. He had great respect for Islam and Islamic scholars. Tughril Beg's biggest goal was to unite the Islamic world and establish a strong state. To achieve this goal, he had to capture Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid state. In the mid-11th century, the Seljuk Turks were rapidly advancing westward from Central Asia. They soon conquered Iran and approached the borders of the Abbasid Empire. The Abbasid Caliph Al-Qaim sent an army to counter the Seljuk threat. However, the Abbasid army was defeated by the Seljuks, and the Seljuk army, under the command of Tughril Beg, began to advance towards Baghdad. The people of Baghdad feared the arrival of the Seljuks. The Abbasid Caliph Al-Qaim tried to resist the Seljuks, but without success. The Seljuk army under the command of Tughril Bey besieged Baghdad and captured the city. Al-Qaim was taken prisoner, and the Seljuks declared Baghdad as their capital. After capturing Baghdad, Tughril Beg treated Al-Qaim with respect. Instead of keeping him as a prisoner, he allocated him a special mansion in the palace. Al-Qaim did not oppose the Seljuk rule and swore allegiance to Tughril Beg. Tughril Beg was a just and merciful ruler. After capturing Baghdad, he gave importance to the reconstruction and development of the city. Mosques, madrasas, caravanserais, and baths were built. Trade and craftsmanship were encouraged. In this way, Baghdad quickly became one of the most important cities of the Seljuk Empire. During the Seljuk period, Baghdad became an important cultural and scientific center of the Islamic world. Madrasas were opened, scientists and artists were patronized, and many important works were produced. During this period, important figures such as Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, Mahmud of Ghazni, and Nizam al-Mulk lived and worked in Baghdad. The Seljuk Turks' capture of Baghdad was an important turning point in Islamic history. It marked the end of the Abbasid Empire and paved the way for the Seljuks to establish a new hegemony in the Middle East. During the Seljuk period, Baghdad became an important center of culture and science and made significant contributions to the development of Islamic civilization. Dear friends, I would now like to take you back to an event that changed the fate of the Islamic world in the 13th century and led to bloody destruction, the Mongol capture of Baghdad in 1258 and the fall of the Abbasid state. This event forever changed the political and cultural map of the Middle East and dealt a major blow to Islamic civilization. The Mongols were a nomadic people who rose from Central Asia in the 13th century and built a great empire under the leadership of Genghis Khan. The Mongols were known for their brave warriors, disciplined armies, and ruthless war tactics. They soon conquered much of Central Asia and began to advance rapidly westward. In the mid-13th century, the Mongol army under the command of Genghis Khan's grandson Hulagu Khan began to advance westward. They conquered Iran and approached the borders of the Abbasid Empire. The Abbasid Caliph al-Mustasim sent an army to counter the Mongol threat, but the Mongol army defeated the Abbasid army. Hulagu Khan laid siege to Baghdad and was determined to capture the city. By the mid-13th century, the Mongol army was advancing rapidly westward. They soon conquered Iran and approached the borders of the Abbasid Empire. The Abbasid Caliph al-Mustasim sent an army to counter the Mongol threat, but the Mongol army defeated the Abbasid army, and the Mongol army under the command of Hulagu Khan besieged Baghdad. The siege lasted 40 days, during which time the Mongols inflicted great damage on the city. Caliph al-Mustasim tried to negotiate peace with the Mongols, but Hulagu Khan refused to make peace. Al-Mustasim refused to surrender and waited for the Mongols to enter the city. Finally, the Mongols entered the city and sacked Baghdad. Thousands of people were massacred, houses and mosques were burned, and the city was devastated. Caliph al-Mustasim and his family were also captured by the Mongols. The Mongols decided to kill Caliph al-Mustasim instead of keeping him as a prisoner. Hulagu Khan accused al-Mustasim of greed and arrogance and sentenced him to death. Al-Mustasim was executed by the Mongols in Baghdad in 1258. After capturing Baghdad, the Mongols inflicted great atrocities on the city. Thousands of people were massacred, houses and mosques were burned, and the city was looted. The Mongols were cruel to the people of Baghdad and razed the city to the ground. The Mongol capture of Baghdad and the fall of the Abbasid Empire had a devastating impact on the Islamic world and the Middle East. This event led to many important consequences. The end of the Abbasid state ending a 500-year reign. This event caused a great shock and sadness in the Islamic world. Mongol hegemony. The Mongols captured Baghdad and established a new hegemony in the Middle East. This state, called the Ilkhanate state, spread over a wide area covering Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Anatolia. Cultural destruction. The Mongols dealt a major blow to Islamic civilization by sacking Baghdad and destroying many important monuments. A decline in science and art. During the Mongol rule, science and art declined. Many scientists and artists were killed or had to migrate. Division in the Islamic world. The collapse of the Abbasid state led to a political and religious division in the Islamic world. The Mongol conquest of Baghdad and the fall of the Abbasid state is one of the most important events in Islamic history. It changed the political and cultural map of the Islamic world forever and dealt a major blow to Islamic civilization. My dear friends, I would like to take you now to an important event in the 8th century that ended the Umayyad conquest attempts in Europe and changed the course of Islamic history. The defeat of the Umayyad armies at the Battle of Cologne in 714. This event dashed the Umayyad dreams of domination in Europe and strengthened Christian Europe's resistance to Islam. In the 7th century, the Umayyad Empire conquered the Middle East and North Africa, building a vast empire. This wave of conquest spread to Europe in the 8th century. After conquering Spain, Umayyad armies crossed the Pyrenees and entered France. In 714, the Frankish army, under Charles Martel, and the Umayyad army came face to face near the city of Cologne. In the early 8th century, the Umayyad Empire was trying to conquer Europe with all its might. After conquering Spain, the Umayyad armies crossed the Pyrenees into France and met the Frankish army under the command of Charles Martel near the city of Cologne in 714. At the beginning of the battle, the Umayyad army gained the upper hand and began to push the Frankish army back. On the brink of defeat, Charles Martel made a bold decision to regroup his army and counterattack. The Frankish army fought relentlessly against the Umayyad army and managed to defeat them. The Battle of Cologne was won by the Frankish army. This victory shattered the Umayyad dreams of domination in Europe and stopped the spread of Islam in Europe. The Frankish Empire emerged as a new political power in Europe with this war. The Battle of Cologne had many important consequences for the Umayyad Empire and Europe. The end of Umayyad dreams of dominance in Europe. This battle shattered the Umayyad dreams of dominance in Europe and halted the spread of Islam in Europe. Strengthening the resistance of Christian Europe. The Battle of Cologne strengthened Christian Europe's resistance to Islam and contributed to the strengthening of Christian identity in Europe. Rise of the Frankish Empire. This war accelerated the rise of the Frankish Empire and its emergence as a new political power in Europe. My dear friends, I would now like to take you back to an important event that changed the political destiny of Europe in the 8th century. The story of Charles Martel becoming Duke of Austrasia in 719. This event was an important turning point in the rise of Charles Martel and the establishment of the Frankish Empire. Charles Martel was a Frankish nobleman who lived in the late 7th and early 8th centuries. Known as a brave commander and charismatic leader, Charles Martel played an important role in the founding of the Frankish Empire and in stopping the Islamic conquests in Europe. In the 7th century, Austrasia was a region covering the northeastern part of the Frankish kingdom. This region was at the center of throne disputes and power struggles among the Frankish kings. In 719, Charles Martel was elected Duke of Austrasia. This was an important turning point in Charles Martel's political career. As Duke of the Duchy of Austrasia, Charles Martel became commander of the Frankish army and became one of the most powerful men in the Frankish kingdom. Year 720, the city of Angers in the northwest of the Frankish kingdom. To stop the Umayyad advance in Europe, the Frankish army, led by Charles Martel, faces the numerically superior Umayyad army. As the sun shines on the waters of the Loire River, the tension of battle is in the air. Martel, standing tall on his horse, delivers a speech inspiring courage in his soldiers. Today we are fighting not only for our land, but for our faith and our future, he says. We inherited this land from our ancestors, and it is our duty to protect it. As the sound of battle trumpets echoes, the two armies clash violently. The Franks fight under Martel's leadership, and with the heroic courage of knights. The Umayyads, despite their superior numbers, cannot overcome the disciplined and organized defense of the Franks. For hours the battle rages on. Blood and sweat mix into the waters of the Loire River. Many heroes perish in this battle. But the Franks do not give up, thanks to Martel's command and the determination of his soldiers. As the sun sets over the horizon, the Frankish army is victorious. The Umayyads retreat with heavy losses. The Battle of Angers goes down in history as a testament to Martel's military genius and leadership skills. This victory not only saves the Frankish kingdom, but also changes the fate of Europe. If Martel and his army had not defeated the Umayyads, it is likely that the Muslims would have conquered Europe and Christianity would have perished. The heroes of the Battle of Angers are remembered for centuries. Charles Martel is remembered as the savior of Europe. This battle is a story of courage, sacrifice, and patriotism. The year 732, near the city of Poitiers, France. Can the Umayyad conquest of Europe be stopped? The answer to this question will be decided in the epic battle ahead. On one side, the heroic leader of the Franks, Charles Martel and his disciplined army, and on the other, the vastly outnumbered Umayyad army and its commander, Abd al-Rahman al-Ghafiqi. As the sun illuminates the battlefield, tension and excitement are in the air. Martel, standing tall on his horse, gives a speech to inspire courage in his soldiers. Today we are fighting not only for our land, but for our faith and our future, he says. We inherited this land from our ancestors, and it is our duty to protect it. As the sound of battle trumpets echoes, the two armies clash violently. The Franks fight under Martel's leadership and with the heroic courage of knights. The Umayyads, despite their superior numbers, cannot overcome the disciplined and organized defense of the Franks. The battle continues for hours. Blood and sweat mix with the soil. Many heroes perish in this battle. But the Franks do not give up, thanks to Martel's command ability and the determination of his soldiers. As the sun sets, there is a glimmer of hope on the horizon. The Franks push the Umayyads back with one last push. The Umayyad army leaves the battlefield with heavy losses. The Battle of Poitiers ends in a Frankish victory. This victory not only saves the Frankish kingdom, but also changes the fate of Europe. If Martel and his army had not defeated the Umayyads, it is likely that the Muslims would have conquered Europe and Christianity would have disappeared. The year 737 marks an important turning point in the Frankish kingdom's rise to power and influence. Charles Martel is determined to conquer Provence and embarks on this historic expedition. This expedition was of great importance, not only to gain territory, but also to strengthen the strategic position of the Frankish kingdom and gain access to the Mediterranean Sea. Provence was an independent kingdom at the time. By conquering this region, the Franks aimed to expand their borders in the south and dominate the Mediterranean trade routes. After gathering his army, Martel set off for Provence. After a long and difficult campaign, the Franks lay siege to Arles, the capital of Provence. Arles is known for its strong walls and brave defenders. Martel knows that he cannot conquer Arles easily. Therefore, he besieges the city for a long time and waits for them to surrender. The siege lasts for months. The people of Arles suffer from hunger and disease. Finally, in desperation, they are forced to surrender the city to the Franks. The conquest of Provence is a great victory for the Frankish kingdom. It significantly increases the power and influence of the Frankish kingdom. It also gives the Franks access to the Mediterranean Sea and allows them to control the trade routes. The year 741. The castle of Quierzy-sur-Oise. Charles Martel, the de facto leader of the Frankish kingdom, the so-called savior of Europe, lies in his bed. After a long and exhausting life, he is about to take his last breath. During his 23-year reign, Martel transformed the Frankish kingdom into one of the most powerful powers in Europe. Thanks to his military genius, leadership skills, and political acumen, he won many important victories and changed the fate of Europe. He defeated the Umayyads at the Battle of Poitiers, preventing the Muslim conquest of Europe, and increased the power and influence of the Frankish kingdom by conquering Provence. Martel was not only a warrior and leader, but also a brilliant statesman and diplomat. He established close ties with the church, gaining political and religious support, and strengthened the Frankish army by laying the foundations of the feudal system. After Martel's death, the Frankish kingdom was divided between his two sons, Carloman and Pepin the Short. Pepin the Short would later found the Carolingian dynasty, ruling Europe for centuries and continuing Charles Martel's legacy. The year 741, the Chateau of Quierzy-sur-Oise. Charles Martel, known as the savior of Europe, lies in his bed. During his 23-year reign, he transformed the Frankish kingdom into one of the most powerful powers in Europe. He defeated the Umayyads at the Battle of Poitiers, preventing the Muslim conquest of Europe, and conquered Provence, increasing the power and influence of the Frankish kingdom. Martel was not only a warrior and leader, but also a brilliant statesman and diplomat. He established close ties with the church, gaining political and religious support, and strengthened the Frankish army by laying the foundations of the feudal system. After Martel's death, the Frankish kingdom was divided between his two sons, Carloman and Pepin the Short. Pepin the Short would later found the Carolingian dynasty, ruling Europe for centuries and continuing Charles Martel's legacy. Pepin the Short was appointed Duke of Austrasia. Eurasia was an important region in the northeastern part of the Frankish kingdom. After becoming Duke of Austrasia, Pepin the Short took important steps to gain control of the region and establish the legitimacy of his kingdom. He forged alliances with local leaders, increased his military power, and received political and religious support from the church. The year 751, the city of Soissons. Political tensions and struggles for the throne continue in the Frankish kingdom. Carloman reigns as king of Neustria and Burgundy, but Pepin the Short is growing in power and influence as Duke of Austrasia. Pepin the Short is a brilliant and charismatic leader. His military skills and political acumen have earned him respect in Eurasia. He established close relations with the church and received political support from Pope Zachary. In this way, he took an important step towards becoming the legitimate king of the Frankish kingdom. In 751, a battle took place between Pepin the Short and Carloman. The battle ended in victory for Pepin the Short. Carloman retires to a monastery and Pepin the Short becomes the sole king of the Frankish kingdom. This is a very important turning point in European history. With Pepin the Short on the throne, the Carolingian dynasty was founded. This dynasty would rule Europe for centuries and play an important role in the political, religious, and cultural development of Europe. The year 754. King Pepin the Short of the Franks was on a campaign against the Lombard kingdom. This was no ordinary war between just one kingdom. This was a showdown that would change the fate of Europe forever. Pepin had just ascended the Frankish throne and was trying to consolidate his authority. The Lombard king Desiderius, on the other hand, threatened the borders of the Frankish kingdom and refused to accept Pepin's legitimacy. Desiderius' behavior was an open challenge to Pepin, and Pepin could not yield to this challenge. Pepin gathered his army and set out for the Lombard kingdom. This army was one of the most powerful in Europe. The Frankish knights were known for their courage and skill. At the head of this army, Pepin was determined to defeat Desiderius and prove the power of the Frankish kingdom. After a long and difficult campaign, the Frankish army arrived in the Lombard capital of Pavia. Pavia was a strong walled city, and Desiderius had made every preparation to defend it. Pepin decided to lay siege to the city. The siege lasted for months. Both sides suffered great losses, but Pepin and his army were not about to give up. Finally, Desiderius' resistance was broken. Exhausted by hunger and disease, the Lombards were forced to surrender. Pepin celebrated his victory. This victory was a very important turning point for the Carolingian dynasty. With this victory, Pepin became one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. The year 768. King Pepin the Short, king of the Franks, passed away, and his son Charlemagne inherited the throne. Charlemagne was only 26 years old, but he was already respected for his courage, intelligence, and leadership skills. Like his father, Charlemagne was determined to increase the power and influence of the Carolingian dynasty. Charlemagne becoming king meant the beginning of a new era for Europe. Charlemagne was determined to become the most powerful ruler, not only of the Frankish kingdom, but of all Europe. To achieve this, Charlemagne embarked on a series of military campaigns and conquered many kingdoms. The most important of Charlemagne's conquests are the following: Lombard Kingdom 774, Saxony 772 to 804, Bavaria 788, Alvar Kingdom 796, Northern region of Spain 801. Charlemagne's conquests significantly changed the political map of Europe. Charlemagne managed to unite a large part of Europe under a single flag. This led to a period of peace and prosperity in Europe. Charlemagne was not only a warrior but also a statesman and a scholar. Charlemagne attached great importance to education and culture. Charlemagne founded many schools and libraries and contributed to the development of art and science in Europe. One of Charlemagne's most important achievements was the establishment of the Holy Roman Empire. In 800, he was crowned Holy Roman Emperor by Pope Leo III in Rome. This further increased Charlemagne's power and influence. The year 772. Charlemagne, king of the Franks, was still new to the throne. Ascending the throne after the death of his father Pepin the Short, Charlemagne was an ambitious and determined leader at the age of 26. He set his sights beyond the borders of the Frankish kingdom. Charlemagne was determined to become the most powerful ruler in Europe and to make the Carolingian dynasty great. One of Charlemagne's greatest obstacles was the Saxons. The Saxons were a pagan people living in northern Germany and were constantly attacking the Frankish kingdom. Charlemagne was determined to eliminate the Saxon threat and secure the northern borders of the Frankish kingdom. In 772, Charlemagne gathered his army and marched into Saxony. It was Charlemagne's first major military campaign, and also a turning point that would change the course of European history. Charlemagne's campaign against the Saxons was long and difficult. The Saxons resisted the Frankish army, taking advantage of fighting on their own territory. But Charlemagne was a determined and intelligent leader. He studied the Saxons' tactics and developed a new plan to defeat them. Charlemagne's plan was based on dividing the Saxons and defeating them one by one. To achieve this, Charlemagne divided his army into several groups and gave each group the task of conquering a different territory. Charlemagne's plan worked. The Saxons could not hold out against the Frankish army and were defeated one by one. In 774, the Saxon king Widukind was forced to surrender. Widukind was forced to convert to Christianity and swear allegiance to Charlemagne. Charlemagne annexed Saxony to the Frankish kingdom and appointed Frankish governors to the region. The campaign against the Saxons was Charlemagne's first major victory. With this victory, Charlemagne became one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. By conquering Saxony, Charlemagne not only secured the northern borders of the Frankish kingdom, but also contributed to the spread of Christianity in Europe. The year 774. Only 2 years had passed since Charlemagne was crowned king of the Franks. In this short time, Charlemagne had become one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. His victory over the Saxons had made Charlemagne's name known throughout Europe and proved the power of the Carolingian dynasty. But Charlemagne's ambitions were not limited to Saxony. Charlemagne was determined to expand the borders of the Frankish kingdom and establish an empire in Europe. One of Charlemagne's biggest obstacles was the Lombard kingdom. The Lombards were a powerful people living in the north of Italy and were a constant threat to the Frankish kingdom. By conquering the Lombard kingdom, Charlemagne would not only secure the southern borders of the Frankish kingdom, but would also be one step closer to his dream of establishing an empire in Europe. In 773, Charlemagne gathered his army and marched against the Lombard kingdom. This was to be one of Charlemagne's most difficult campaigns. The Lombards took advantage of fighting on their own soil and resisted the Frankish army. But Charlemagne was a determined and intelligent leader. He studied the Lombards' tactics and developed a new plan to defeat them. Charlemagne's plan was to encircle the Lombards and starve them out. To achieve this, Charlemagne sent his army to lay siege to the Lombard capital of Pavia. The siege lasted for months. The Lombards began to starve as food and water ran out. Finally, the Lombard king Desiderius was forced to surrender. In 774, the city of Pavia fell and the Lombard kingdom was annexed to the Frankish kingdom. Charlemagne exiled the Lombard king Desiderius and his family. By conquering the Lombard kingdom, Charlemagne not only secured the southern borders of the Frankish kingdom, but also contributed to the spread of Christianity in Europe. The year is 788. 16 years have passed since Charlemagne was crowned king of the Franks. During these 16 years, Charlemagne had become one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. By conquering Saxony, the Lombard kingdom, and many other kingdoms, Charlemagne had expanded the borders of the Frankish kingdom and significantly increased the power and influence of the Carolingian dynasty. But Charlemagne's ambitions were not limited to this. Charlemagne was determined to build an empire in Europe and was ready to overcome any obstacle to achieve this dream. One of the biggest obstacles in front of Charlemagne was the Duchy of Bavaria. The Duchy of Bavaria was a powerful people living in the south of Germany and was a constant threat to the Frankish kingdom. By conquering the Duchy of Bavaria, Charlemagne would not only secure the southeastern borders of the Frankish kingdom, but would also be one step closer to his dream of creating an empire in Europe. In 788, Charlemagne gathered his army and marched on the Duchy of Bavaria. This was to be one of Charlemagne's most difficult campaigns. Duke Tassilo of Bavaria took advantage of fighting on his own territory to resist the Frankish army. But Charlemagne was a decisive and intelligent leader. He studied the Duke of Bavaria's tactics and developed a new plan to defeat them. Charlemagne's plan was to isolate Duke Tassilo of Bavaria and force him to fight alone against the Frankish army. To achieve this, Charlemagne divided his army into several groups and assigned each group the task of conquering a different territory. Charlemagne's plan worked. Duke Tassilo of Bavaria could not stand against the Frankish army and was forced to fight alone. After a short battle, Duke Tassilo of Bavaria was forced to surrender. In 788, the Duchy of Bavaria was annexed to the Frankish kingdom. Charlemagne exiled Duke Tassilo of Bavaria to a monastery. By conquering the Duchy of Bavaria, Charlemagne not only secured the southeastern borders of the Frankish kingdom, but also contributed to the spread of Christianity in Europe. The year 796. It had been 22 years since Charlemagne was crowned king of the Franks. During these 22 years, Charlemagne had become one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. By conquering Saxony, the Lombard kingdom, the Duchy of Bavaria, and many other kingdoms, Charlemagne had expanded the borders of the Frankish kingdom and significantly increased the power and influence of the Carolingian dynasty. But Charlemagne's ambitions were not limited to this. Charlemagne was determined to build an empire in Europe and was ready to overcome any obstacle to achieve this dream. One of the biggest obstacles in front of Charlemagne was the Avar kingdom. The Avar kingdom was a nomadic people living in Central Europe and had one of the most powerful armies in Europe. The Avar kingdom was constantly attacking the Frankish kingdom and threatening the trade routes in Europe. By conquering the Avar kingdom, Charlemagne would not only secure the northeastern borders of the Frankish kingdom, but also control the trade routes in Europe and consolidate his dominance in Europe. In 796, Charlemagne gathered his army and marched against the Avar kingdom. This was to be one of Charlemagne's most difficult campaigns. The Avars used the advantage of fighting on their own territory to resist the Frankish army. But Charlemagne was a determined and intelligent leader. He studied the tactics of the Avars and developed a new plan to defeat them. Charlemagne's plan was to besiege the Avar capital and starve them out. To achieve this, Charlemagne divided his army into several groups and gave each group the task of conquering a different region. Charlemagne's plan worked. The Avars could not hold out against the Frankish army and their capital was besieged. After a short battle, the Avar kingdom was forced to surrender. In 796, the Avar kingdom was annexed to the Frankish kingdom. Charlemagne seized the treasures of the Avar kingdom and took control of the trade routes in Europe. By conquering the Avar kingdom, Charlemagne not only secured the northeastern borders of the Frankish kingdom, but also contributed to the spread of Christianity in Europe. The year is 800. Charlemagne, king of the Franks, has been on the throne for 28 years. During these 28 years, Charlemagne had become one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. By conquering Saxony, the Lombard kingdom, the Duchy of Bavaria, the Avar kingdom, and many other kingdoms, Charlemagne had expanded the borders of the Frankish kingdom and significantly increased the power and influence of the Carolingian dynasty. Charlemagne's ambitions were not limited to this. Charlemagne was determined to build an empire in Europe and was ready to overcome any obstacle to achieve this dream. One of Charlemagne's biggest obstacles was the legitimacy of the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire was considered the heir to the Roman Empire and the only empire in Europe. Charlemagne wanted to challenge the legitimacy of the Byzantine Empire and establish an empire in Europe. On Christmas Day 800, Charlemagne was crowned Holy Roman Emperor by Pope Leo III in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. This was a turning point in European history. With Charlemagne's coronation, a new empire was born in Europe, the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire consolidated Charlemagne's conquests and his political and religious authority in Europe. As Holy Roman Emperor, Charlemagne worked to ensure peace and prosperity in Europe. He promoted education and culture, built churches and monasteries, and contributed to the spread of Christianity in Europe. The year 801, just 1 year after Charlemagne was crowned Holy Roman Emperor, he embarked on his last campaign against the Saxons. Charlemagne had been fighting against the Saxons for more than 30 years, and this time he was determined to teach them a lesson and make them fully subject to Frankish rule. Charlemagne's last campaign against the Saxons was a harsh and brutal one. Charlemagne burned forests, pillaged villages, and killed or enslaved many Saxons to break Saxon resistance. Charlemagne's aim was to subjugate the Saxons to Frankish rule and make them accept Christianity. Charlemagne's campaign was long and difficult, but in the end the Saxons had to surrender. In 804, the Saxon king Widukind converted to Christianity and swore allegiance to Charlemagne. Charlemagne completed his last campaign against the Saxons with a victory. In 812, the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne completed the construction of a magnificent cathedral in the city of Aachen. This cathedral was a symbol of Charlemagne's imperial power and glory, and was to become one of the most important religious buildings in Europe. Aachen Cathedral was built in Aachen, Charlemagne's favorite city. Charlemagne considered Aachen the capital of his empire and took a special interest in the city. The cathedral was built right next to Charlemagne's palace and was designed as a place where the emperor could perform his daily prayers. Aachen Cathedral was inspired by Byzantine architecture and is considered one of the most beautiful and important churches in Europe. The cathedral had a dome decorated with gold mosaics and a large transepts. The interior of the cathedral was decorated with frescoes and sculptures depicting scenes from the Bible. Aachen Cathedral was not only a religious building, but also a symbol of Charlemagne's imperial power and splendor. Charlemagne allocated a large amount of money and resources for the construction of the cathedral and celebrated its completion as one of the highlights of his empire. The Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne died in the city of Aachen at the age of 72. Charlemagne was one of the most important rulers in European history and transformed Europe during his 46-year reign. By conquering Saxony, the Lombard Kingdom, the Duchy of Bavaria, the Avar Kingdom, and many other kingdoms, Charlemagne expanded the borders of the Frankish kingdom and significantly increased the power and influence of the Carolingian dynasty. Charlemagne founded the Holy Roman Empire and worked to ensure peace and prosperity in Europe, promoted education and culture, and contributed to the spread of Christianity. Charlemagne's death was a great loss for Europe. After Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Empire began to weaken, and the era of unity and stability in Europe came to an end. But Charlemagne's legacy lives on. Charlemagne significantly changed the political and religious map of Europe and contributed to the development of Western civilization. We have come to the end of this video, in which we have covered important topics such as the Umayyad and Abbasid period, Charles Martel and the Battle of Poitiers, the founding of the Holy Roman Empire, and the reign of Charlemagne. In this video, we examine the complex political and religious landscape of Europe in the 8th and 9th centuries and told the story of the rise of Charlemagne and the beginning of a new era in Europe. The story of Charlemagne is not just the story of one man, but the story of Europe and Western civilization. Charlemagne united the lands he conquered, founded the Holy Roman Empire, and worked to bring peace and prosperity to Europe. Charlemagne promoted education and culture and contributed to the spread of Christianity. Charlemagne's legacy is still alive in Europe. Charlemagne significantly changed the political and religious map of Europe and contributed to the development of Western civilization. Charlemagne is still considered a legend in Europe. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please like the video and subscribe. See you in the next video. Thank you.